All right, looking at lesson 7, top priority. Top priority, lesson number 7 on page 65. There was this particular lesson. Let me just kind of give you my thought on this lesson. It is a good lesson in the way that it's a good lesson in the things that it emphasizes. It's not my favorite in that it's long on stories and short on scriptures, and that's not been indicative of this book, generally speaking. And there are some great accounts in this lesson, but I found it just to be a little bit short on text. And so, with that in mind, the lesson opens with the account of the life of Brother Harvey Childress, and he was a great gospel preacher. I don't want to say innovator, but he was a man who got a lot done in his life as he sought to put the kingdom first in all of his doings. And the impetus behind that was that he had heard a sermon or had heard some material with regard to Matthew 6:33, that says that we are to seek first the kingdom of God. And he, from a young age, dedicated himself to that principle and then accomplished so many things throughout the course of his life. Now, on page 66, in the middle of the second line there at the top of the page, after talking about all the impressions that verse had on him and the result, it says, then what about you? How might this one simple command to seek first the kingdom change your life? And would following it more consistently cause a shift in any of your values or require you to reorganize some of your priorities? To help you think more seriously about potential impact of kingdom-seeking decisions, it says, I wanted to challenge you to consider 3 questions. Actually, it's 3 ideas, that might prove to be uncomfortably revealing. And so the first header there on page 66 is seeking the kingdom in our finances. Of course, he asks a question at the beginning of each paragraph. Is the kingdom first when it comes to how you spend your money? And of course, I mentioned this at least in passing last Sunday, and I'm not too shy to talk about or preach about giving and what the Bible has to say about giving and what the Bible has to say about sacrifice. I grew up in a church where giving was never taught, ever. In Dexter, Missouri, they didn't teach on giving, not from the pulpit, not in Bible class, ever. And as a result, their giving was pitiful. And to this day, it's still pretty pitiful. And I'll tell you what, I've probably told you this story, but the local preachers never talked about giving, so they got him for lack of a better term, they got him a hired gun one Sunday, just to bring somebody in that nobody knew. And this guy supposedly was traveling the country preaching on giving, probably not unlike V.P. Black did for many, many years. And he did the Brotherhood a great service for many years in his preaching and his Bible, his workbooks on giving. But they brought in this guy that, I don't know that anybody ever heard of him. Man, he came in there and he preached a stem winder on giving. And this is absolute truth. They did not, now normally they did things the scriptural way. Preaching was last. You have the singing and the Lord's Supper and the giving and the preaching's last. That's the biblical order, right? So they decided they'd do things out of order. They was going to wait to the end of the service either to have the Lord's Supper and the giving or just the giving until after the sermon. As God is my witness, the giving was almost half of what it normally was. It's almost like everybody in that building said, we'll teach y'all. We'll teach you to come in here and teach us about giving, and giving was about half of what it normally was. It was unbelievable. Now, to further illustrate this, back, it's been over 20 years ago. Matter of fact, it wasn't long after I got here, probably about 97, 98, somewhere in there. We were wanting to do some things with this church building, with the interior. The pews needed to be recovered. We needed new carpet. We needed remodeling on the inside. But the giving of the church here was not very good. In fact, it was pitiful. When I came here, the giving was about $1,000 or $1,100 a week, and they had over 100 people on any given Sunday morning. $10 per person per week. Now that's pretty pitiful. And so I preached on giving about 5 Sundays in a row. And my mom liked to fell out. She said, I didn't know there was enough in the New Testament to preach 5 sermons on giving. Now my mom was a faithful Christian, but the point is, she had been so programmed through her life there, particularly at Dexter, that she just didn't know that there was that much in the Bible about giving. In fact, that's probably the number one subject in all the scriptures. There's more about money in the Bible than basically any other non-Christ, any other non-messianic subject. There's more about money than anything else. And but we wanted to do some things, and Walter and Wade and BA, said, well, if the people, we want to do some things, but if the people will come up with it, we'll do it. So I preached on giving about 4 or 5 Sundays in a row. I preached on the giving of the patriarchs. I preached on the giving of the Jews at least once or twice. I preached on the giving in the New Testament. And our giving went up dramatically over the course of the weeks and months ahead. And then we were able to do all the things we wanted to do to the building. And then, as has always been our tradition, so to speak, we took that money and put it into mission work. We had a need, we met the need, and we took that money and did more good things with it. And so, but when congregations are not taught to give, they will not give. When people are not shown where the money goes, they will not give. And it's always been the policy of this church to have a monthly statement on the board, giving an account for every dime, every penny in, every penny out. And I think that's the way to do it. We do our budget every year. Before I came, we didn't do a budget. There was no program of work. But when people can see, when they're taught, and Shannon, I'll just tell you this, not this Shannon, Shannon in the back. One of your kinfolks come up to me back during that time. He said, I've increased my giving twice in the last 5 weeks. And that was pretty moving, to know that somebody's heart could be moved, and then to be moved again to think about it and make yet another improvement. And so we need to be mindful of the fact that our finances they belong to God, and they need to be our financial planning needs to begin with the work of the church. In other words, we don't buy a house and buy a car and do all the things we want to do and then figure out how much we want to give after we've already done all the things that we want to do. Buy a boat or new guns or wave runner, just fill in the blank. The work of the church has to be on the top. It has to be on the top line of our personal finances. And that's the only way to do it. Because from the Old Testament forward, for example, Proverbs 3 and verse 9, honor the Lord with all thy substance and with the first fruit of all thy increase. And so every time we receive some blessing from the Lord, for example, if you've got a 40-hour-a-week job and you get paid the same every week, kind of like I do, or kind of like Rhonda might, then your giving can be consistent week after week. But if you work a 40-hour-a-week job and you're blessed with overtime, the Lord, that needs to be acknowledged in your giving. When I hold a gospel meeting, my giving out of my gospel meeting remuneration is completely separate from what we do from week to week. It's not even given into consideration. And so that's kingdom first giving. And then he talks about in the second paragraph how as a young preacher he was afraid to preach on giving. And that's never, I can't identify with that because I was blessed in my first work as a preacher to work with elders that wanted the Bible preached. Now, the giving here was not good for a long time, and basically for one reason. There were about 3 fairly wealthy men who were members here that essentially bankrolled everything. You know, if Preacher's House needed to be built, those 3 guys were going to get it done. Fellowship Building needs to be built, those 3 guys are going to get it done. That doesn't say that nobody else did anything, but the point is that everybody looked to those 3 guys to come up with the money that was needed to do something, rather than everybody working together collectively to get those things done. And in fact, that mentality had robbed the people of really having any real investment in the work. You know, the more I'm invested in a work, the more interest I'm going to take in that work. You know, the more interested I'm going to be in making sure that it's successful, that it goes well, that it prospers. And so that's kingdom first giving. The bottom of page 66, the note says that a preacher once wrote, and I don't like this illustration, even though it's probably true. In days gone by, churches would solicit the help of the community to build their church buildings. Like a church might be built in town, and they go around and ask every businessman in town to make a contribution to help construct that building. And this count comes along by that. Let me tell a story on that. There was a member of the church in town that was a businessman, and a denomination in town was going to build a building. They were in the process, and they were going around asking all the local businesses to contribute to the construction of that building. And they came to the member of the church. He said, I will contribute to the construction of this building, provided you put up a 10 by 10 sign in where your building says, this is the Church of Christ. And they said, well, we're not going to do that. He said, well, all right, I'll contribute to it if you put a 10 by 10 sign up that says, this is not the Church of Christ. And they weren't willing then either. So he didn't have to contribute. So in this particular case, the businessman's approach, and he says, best I can tell, said, the only thing I can figure out about religion or this church is give, give, give. And the preacher said, I want to thank you for giving me about the best definition of Christianity that has ever been given. Because Christianity is a giving religion. When you look at the giving of the early church in Acts chapter 2, Acts chapter 4, Acts chapter 5, just talking about the early church meeting the needs of the people. Go to Acts 19 and the church at Ephesus, where those Gentile pagan converts had a book burning. And they burned their religious books that were in contradiction to the Word of God. It says the price of that book burning was valued at more than 50,000 pieces of silver. I mean, that's a tremendous. That is kingdom first giving. That is willing to make great sacrifice as a testimony to the truth. I'll tell you this: a friend of mine in town was a member of a local denomination, and he left it. And here's what he told me. I didn't know he'd left, and he told me, he said, they don't care if you come, as long as you send them your envelope every week. They don't care if you come, as long as you send them your envelope every week. He said, and if you go even one Sunday without sending them your envelope, you'll get a call. But you can stay gone 2 months and never get a call as long as you send your envelope. Now, that is a sad commentary on a church. Now, sometimes people say, and I've heard people say this, they say, all the church cares about is my money. All they care about is money. All right? I've never known a generous person to say that. I've never known a person who is physically invested in the local work to say that. If they say all they care about is my money, then say, all right, well we've got a program here that we need about 5 hours of your time extra every week. Well, how about that? Oh no, they don't have time for that either. So when you hear statements like that, it's never a reflection on the church. It's never a reflection on the church. It's a reflection on the individual making that statement. All right, on the top of page 67, first full paragraph says, when it comes to making kingdom-seeking decisions, love is not satisfied with the daily minimum requirements. Love does not ask how little, but rather how much can I give. Now, when I worked at Arvin in my hometown, it's a manufacturing plant to make exhaust systems for automobiles. And when I worked there over the summer, it was line work, manufacturing work, and you had what was called minimum expected production. In other words, wherever it was that you were, whatever you were doing, they expected X number of pieces every single hour for 8 hours. And I worked in a welding booth loading rotating tables. I'd put flanges on pieces of pipe, and the welder would weld on one table while I was loading the next table. And all day long, it was just table to table, table to table. And I think our minimum expected production was like, I'm just going to throw a number out, okay? 135 pieces an hour. 135 pieces an hour. Well, it was the middle of summer. Obviously, it wasn't air conditioned in that place. It was about probably 120, 130 degrees inside that booth. And the welder, who was a friend of mine, would never let them count more than the minimum expected production when they came by every hour for count. Didn't matter how many we put in there, he'd never let them write down more than the minimum expected production. So at the end of the day, we had built up enough overage to cover the 8th hour, and he didn't have to weld. Which I kind of don't blame him, because he's wearing that heavy coat and he's losing about 10 pounds a day. But as long as you were minimum expected production, boss man couldn't say anything to you. Now, while that might work in that environment, it's not going to work with the church. You know, too many people think about what is the very minimum I can do and get by and still, what can I do and scrape by the skin of my teeth and make it into heaven? That attitude is just wrong-headed from the start. It's not indicative of a mind that has any appreciation for what God has done for us. So, back to the lesson, love does not ask how little, but rather how much I can give. One of my favorite statements is from the Old Testament on giving is David said, I refuse to offer to the Lord that which costs me nothing. I believe it was the Ark of the Covenant was at the household, the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. And David wanted to purchase that threshing floor and build an altar as a testimony of thankfulness to God. And he wanted to buy it from Araunah. And he said, look, if it's for the Lord, you can have it. Which tells you about his heart. I won't take, if it's for the Lord, you just take it. And David said, no. He said, I will surely buy it at a price, for I will not offer to the Lord that which costs me nothing. Now, in the overall scheme of David's wealth, what did that threshing floor cost? It's like buying a pack of gum, right? But it reveals the heart of both of those men. The heart of both of those men is revealed. I will not offer to the Lord that which costs me nothing. And I've oftentimes said, there are a lot of Christians who give, but it really doesn't cost them anything. In other words, their giving does not in any significant way change the way that they live. And if my giving does not make a significant change in the type of life that I live, then it cannot be sacrificial. Now, the Bible does not teach that we have to give ourselves into poverty. 1 Timothy chapter 6, 17 to 19 says, command them that are rich in this world that they not be high-minded or trust in uncertain riches, but be willing to share and laying up for themselves treasures in heaven. So there were rich people in the church. The Bible does not condemn being rich. The Bible does not command that the rich have to give themselves into poverty. But what they do have to do is be prepared that whatever they have, when there is a need that arises, obviously everybody has to give liberally, generously, with a cheerful heart. But when the chips are down, obviously those that have more is expected of them. And so in Luke 21, speaks to the widow, says, out of her poverty, put in all the livelihood she had. I like Mark's account better. So she has given all that she had, even her very living. You think about some great givers in the Old Testament. The widow at Zarephath. Elijah says, there's a famine in the land. It hadn't rained in 3.5 years, and there's a famine in the land, and oil and flour and things are in short supply, and God instructs Elijah to go and to inquire at that woman, to make him a cake. And he says, make me something to eat. And she says, all I've got here is just a little bit of flour and a little oil, and that's all I've got. And it said, and I'm going to make it, and I'm going to give, me and my son are going to eat it, and then we're going to die. You know what Elijah said? Make me a cake. Make me a cake. What'd she do? She made him a cake. And then what happened? She got more. Matter of fact, never ran out. And so, she was willing to give the man of God the last bite of food that she had. Now that's kingdom first. That's kingdom first giving. You have the Macedonians in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. It says, they gave according to their ability, and I don't know how you give beyond your ability, but that's how Paul described it. They gave beyond their ability. He said, out of their great poverty, they gave beyond their ability. Now, the key to understanding that is verse 5. It says, now they did this because they first gave of themselves to the Lord. In other words, when I give myself to the Lord, then when I belong to the Lord, everything that I have belongs to the Lord. And so they were able to do that because they gave themselves to the Lord first, and then were able to give abundantly beyond that. A verse that I'm surprised is not in here is 2 Corinthians 8:24, where Paul is exhorting them to give, the Corinthians to give, based on the fact that they had promised to give. He said, but I don't want you to give out of necessity, just in order to keep your word. He says, I want you to show the proof of your love. The proof of your love, 2 Corinthians 8 and verse number 24. So kingdom, seeking the kingdom first in our finances. Secondly is seeking the kingdom with our time. How does the church rate in the amount of time that you spend? By the way, when I say time that you spend, I mean time that belongs to you. All right. Let's just. I wish I could sleep 8 hours a night, but let's just assume that we can get 8 hours of sleep a night. All right? Or lay in bed awake 2 hours and sleep 6 hours. All right? So 8 hours dedicated to sleep. Then you got basically, probably close to 9 or 10 hours dedicated to work. By prepping for work, driving to work, going to work, coming home. So say 8 hours for sleep and 10 hours for work. Well, that only leaves 8 hours, right? Or 6 hours. Leaves only 6 hours. So in essence, we have about 6 hours a day that belongs to us. So, and by the way, we know that there are other obligations. If you have children, you have to spend time. You have to spend time with your children. You have to raise your children in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. And so you may have to take care of your family members. You may have a sick mother, sick father, somebody in your family that requires tending to. All right? That time does not belong to you. But the question is, in the time that belongs to you, how much of it is given in any degree to personal spiritual growth and development, or the spiritual growth and development of others? That's where the rubber meets the road. In the time that belongs to me, how much of that time is spent in anything that could be remotely called kingdom-related activities? And he gives a lot of examples here. Talk about a guy that can go climb a tree stand before daylight and climb down after dark. Spend all day in a tree stand. I'm not that guy. I love to deer hunt, but I'm not that guy. I'm the guy that's going to hunt till about 2 hours after the sun comes up, and I'm not going to go out till about an hour before the sun goes down. The rest of that's just dead time, as far as I'm concerned. That's probably why I never kill any great big deer. They all know when I'm coming and going. They're probably out having a party by 11:30 every morning, because they know I'm not going to be anywhere around. But how much time spent, hunting, fishing, in recreation of some sort. He talked about playing basketball. That was something he loved to do. Some people work. They spend a lot of time. They spend a lot of time with their hobbies. And again, nothing wrong with having a hobby. Nothing in the world wrong with having a hobby. But things have to be prioritized. They have to find their proper place. In our list of daily priorities. One thing I try to do is to do things that I love and incorporate spiritual development into those things. For example, a lot of times if I'm having to drive somewhere, like if I'm just driving back and forth to town, it takes me about 15 minutes to get to town. Well, I can listen on, I can listen to a guy read the Bible over the speakers in my truck, and I can listen to 2 or 3 chapters going to town. I can listen to 2 or 3 chapters coming home. I've listened to entire books being read on my way to Missouri or other places. If I'm in a deer stand, I've got a Bible with me. I might even have my, if it's Saturday, I probably have my Sunday morning outline with me in the deer stand. In other words, I'm doing things that I love to do, but at the same time, I'm trying to maximize the time that I have. And we can do those kinds of things. For example, even in recreational matters. Kenny Burleson was, at one time, was well known for trying to convert people while he carried them fishing. That he would go and he'd carry people fishing, and when they were fishing, he'd talk to them about their soul, and talk to them about the need, to obey the gospel and follow the Lord, and he had some success doing that. So what was he doing? Well, he was doing something that he loved, and yet at the same time he was incorporating kingdom work into that. What's the word I'm looking for? Entertainment, or just pursuit of pleasure. And so lots of ways that we can do a lot of good things, even while not at the expense, say, of others. Then lastly is on page 69, talking about seeking the kingdom in our conversations. How much time do we spend out when we're outside the walls of the church? How much time do we spend talking about the Bible? There's a comedian that I really like. He's from I think he's from Opelika. His name is Dusty Slay. That's his stage name anyway. And he's as redneck as they come. But he is a what we would call a clean comedian. There's no cursing or any profanity in his act. And he's not a Christian in the New Testament sense of the word, but he is what we would call in a general way, he's a believer. And he talked about when he left a life of worldliness and started trying to live the way he thought that God wanted him to live, that they would go out, they'd go to church, and then he and his friends would go out to eat lunch. And he said, and I would try to talk to people about something that was said during church or in Bible class. And he said, and the response that I kept getting is, dude, we just took care of that. They're over here wanting to talk about football. And Dusty's wanting to talk about the Bible. And Dusty's statement was, by the way, this is not part of his comedy act, it's part of he has a podcast called We're Having a Good Time. And in his podcast, he goes, listen, I got 1 million people I can talk about football with. He said, you're the only people I can talk Bible with, and they just didn't get it. just didn't get it. But, they thought, well, we got our Bible talk out of the way when we went to church, and now it's time, it's time to talk about something else. That's one thing I love about when I was going overseas. Our conversations were always just dominated by, we were talking about the Bible. When Bill and I went to, Kenya and Ghana that year, we had some horrible weather, and it kept us holed up a lot in our hotel. We couldn't even get out. But we had each taken the same commentary on the book of Psalms, and we were working. In our downtime, we worked together through that commentary and writing down sermon outlines and talking about things. And man, there's just nothing like it. You get in that environment, and you can talk with people, about the Bible. And we don't do. I don't think we do that enough. Look, it's good to get together and have fellowship and be in one another's homes. But how much time do we spend? How much time do we spend in our conversations with our brethren talking about Bible things? I regularly get phone calls from a fellow that's teaching in that class right there, wanting to talk about Bible stuff. Matter of fact, I got one this week. You know what he told me? Because he's not going to know I've said this. He said, I was up all night studying last night. I couldn't sleep. I was up all night studying, and we talked about what he studied, and he asked me some questions. We usually talk 15, 20 minutes, sometimes longer. Listen, nothing makes me happier than taking those kind of phone calls. I'm really glad to pick up the phone and have somebody want to talk to me about the Bible instead of my extended car warranty. And so, but I love having those conversations. Those are the best conversations because they're so encouraging. So we want to be a people who are dedicated to having conversations that revolve around the kingdom. By the way, that doesn't mean that we have to talk about the Bible 24/7. Not a sin to talk about football. Okay, not a sin to talk about fishing. Not a sin to talk about shopping or Chuck and Joanna or whatever their names is. Chip. Okay, Chip and Joanna. Okay, see, tells how much attention I pay. I don't watch them anyway. I watch them two yahoos down there in Laurel. I can't even tell you their names either. Aaron and somebody. Ben, there you go. So, yeah, so I'm really in on that. So, but, it's all right to talk about those things. It's all right to spend time. It's all right, I like watching those shows with Rhonda. Because you know why? I never get mad when I watch those shows. I don't have to worry about getting mad. You throw me something else on there, and they're going to throw some kind of perversion out there, and I'm out. You throw out the perverts there, I'm out. I'm gone. Channel change. I'm done. And so, that's one reason I like those shows. So, it's all right to talk about those things and spend some time along those lines. But we need to focus more. We need to focus more on having kingdom-directed conversations. And so, you have on page 70, you have a number of examples. My favorite example is Acts 4. Acts 5 is the most well-known. We ought to obey God rather than men. But my favorite line is in chapter 4 in verse 18, where it says, we cannot but speak of those things which we have seen and heard. We cannot help but speak of those things which we have seen and heard. To me, that's the great line. That's the great line, because it talks about, it emphasizes the fact that the apostles were not going to be quieted. Jail threatenings, jail beatings, these things were not going to persuade the apostles to keep their silence. And so we want to be a people mindful of having kingdom-directed conversations. By the way, there's a book by a guy by the name of Greg Koukl, Koukl. Not a New Testament Christian, but the book is very helpful. I found it very helpful. The book is called Tactics. Greg Koukl, Tactics. And the book is designed to help everyday Christians, believers, direct conversations in a kingdom direction. Not so much early on in the book, not so much in the sense that you're going to convince that person to sit down and have a Bible study with you right then, but to get their mind going in that direction. And as he would say, his saying in that book is called "Put a rock in their shoe." Put a rock in their shoe. In other words, give them something to think about that they just can't shake. No matter what they're going through the day, at some point their mind is going to come back. In other words, that rock is going to make himself known. And so I highly recommend that book. You can buy it on Amazon or Books of Million or whatever for less than $10. Just a little, it's probably about like this book right here, the size of it. It's just a little practical book called Tactics, and I highly recommend it. I've given several copies away. So, but it helps us. It's a book that I have found helpful. To direct conversations in a kingdom-oriented direction. All right. Any questions or comments about any of that? All right. Lord willing, next week, chapter 8, Golden Rule Guided Decisions. Golden Rule Guided Decisions, page 72.